Dave, how you doing?
Nice. I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, for the listener, I just met you like a week ago.
Mm-hmm.
I know almost nothing about you,
Sure.
but you were welcoming enough to have a conversation with me.
Yep.
And so the point of this really is I just enjoy meeting people from all walks of life. And I was intrigued by what you said you did for work.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we talked a little bit in the sauna. And then you were gracious enough to say, yeah, continue this conversation.
Yep.
And so the way it normally goes, it's basically an oral biography of your life. And so we can get into, different aspects of your life and then, talk a little bit about what it is you actually do.
Mm-hmm.
And then, what I find in the conversation is there's people will say something or there's different principles or ideas that you've picked up along the way that I find interesting, and sometimes we go deeper into that.
Okay.
So if we could start from the beginning, let's talk about Dave childhood.
Sure. Well, I was born in Colorado. My dad was a doctor or was in medical school at the time, and so my mother and father were bouncing around a bit in my earliest years.
Mm-hmm.
We eventually settled in Rapid City, South Dakota, which is really where I'm from, where I grew up.
Mm-hmm.
And so I grew up just outside the town of Rapid City. I have a younger brother and a younger sister, and was there until I was 18. I came out here to go to college, is what brought me out here to the Pacific Northwest.
So let's I always like getting into childhood and what that was like.
Sure.
And so what decade was it when you were like 6 to like 12?
Yeah, so the 80s mainly,
Okay.
right? Or I was born in 1970, and so it was really an 80s kid growing up.
So what did kids do back then? What was common? What was your childhood like?
Sure.
Sports?
I mean, we played sports. I was a soccer player and ran track. As little kids, we'd ride bikes, and so there was no internet to ride and all that sort of stuff. And so a lot of our time was spent, outside, or if it wasn't, I remember reading comic books and things like that. I was in the Boy Scouts for years, which got me up into the Black Hills.
Did you become was it Eagle?
I did, yeah. So along with a number of my friends from back then, we all sort of did all that and learned, outdoors and camping and all the stuff that goes with that.
Yeah, I don't know if Boy Scouts is as common as it once was.
I don't think so, no. But
which is sad, but
yeah, it is. It was a big part of my childhood for sure.
Yeah. So what do you think you got? What are some of the things you got out of Boy Scouts?
Is it self-reliance, maybe I would say, the ability to sort of solve problems or figure things out on my own. And it was, and also just camaraderie and being with other kids my age and everything that went with that.
Were there any merit badges that were memorable, or what was your Eagle Scout project?
I mean, I remember, I don't know if I could recall really specific badges, but but I remember, to be an Eagle Scout, you had to do a community service project. And I remember we sort of redid a playground in my hometown, that was decrepit and all beat up and stuff like that. So we replaced the jungle gyms and repaired the slides and did that sort of work to basically reintroduce a playground to the nearest school where I went to school. And so that was kind of a neat project as a 16-year-old kid or 15-year-old kid to be a part of. And
yeah, I did Boy Scouts in middle school.
Okay.
In the Philippines.
Okay, interesting.
And the funnest part for me was the camping trips.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And over there, safety wasn't as big of a deal. It's probably similar to the 80s, where now doing Boy Scouts, probably so many safety parameters.
Supervised everything. Yeah.
Or I'm sure back then you could probably get away with a lot more.
We did go on some backpacking trips, that were by ourselves, or with very little supervision.
Yeah.
Hiking into the backcountry and that sort of thing. So
yeah, I did. We climbed Mount Pinatubo.
Cool.
In the Philippines. Just a lot of fun stuff. I didn't like the week stuff. That wasn't very fun.
Yeah, understood.
But when it came to the actual trips,
the adventures that you go on. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
those were kind of fun. I remember our first one. We're sixth grade, and what do sixth graders do when they all are together? They just they do dumb stuff.
Yeah, dumb stuff. Yeah.
So I don't know why we thought this was a smart idea, but obviously none of us are sleeping. It was in the backyard of someone's house.
Okay.
So it's like,
Right.
they just want to know, like, can these kids survive without their parents without
Yeah.
burning everything down? So I don't know, 2 o'clock in the morning, obviously we're not sleeping, and we're like, why don't we take out everyone's tent pegs, including ours, and see how that works out? So they can't figure out who did it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we did, even the scoutmaster,
Yeah.
and obviously the tent falls in, and
Yeah.
he's like, wakes up and
Yeah.
is yelling at everyone. We're like, it happened to us too. We don't know who it was. Clearly, you know who it was, but
Yeah. Exactly.
yeah. So we did a lot of mischievous things,
Yeah.
but
That's great. That's great.
but yeah, that's that Boy Scout experience. I don't think young kids are getting that kind of.
Yeah. Or less are.
Yeah.
I think we're probably right. I have fun. I mean, also because I've got 3 girls, I was never really involved in scouts as an adult.
Yeah.
But a fun little thing every year when we're done with our Christmas tree, that's the Boy Scouts that will recycle Christmas trees, or collect them,
Yeah.
take them, and make a donation. But every time I do that, it's my like one time a year that I just interface with scouts and their dads for 5 minutes,
Right.
just a little bit. But it's
Yeah.
just kind of fun because I'll recite like the Boy Scout motto. That,
Yeah, I don't know if I can. I don't even know the beginning. What's the beginning?
I mean, the one I remember is a scout is trustworthy, loyal, friendly,
yes.
courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent. That's
Yeah.
the one that just sort of won't go away.
Yeah.
But I'll whip that out when I'm talking to the scouts every Christmas and just kind of get a chuckle from. The
Yeah,
dads,
I think there's definitely good things being when you're a child and you're part of something. I think that can instill something in you as you get older.
Yeah, sure.
And I'm looking at young people today and what values or principles do they have? And I think we're losing some of that, or they don't have any.
Yeah, that's possible.
Not that they even have good or bad ones; they just don't have any framework to operate under.
Much less, at least. Yeah.
And Boy Scouts provided that, and I don't know what.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. It's like being on a sports team and other things too. They give you a little bit of structure to how you're.
So going into middle school, high school, did you have a grand idea of what you want to do? Some kids, I want to be an astronaut, or I want to do this, or.
Right. I mean, see, sort of. I mean, as I got later, I definitely thought. So I had a few things that were kind of merging together. One was I wanted to get out of South Dakota. So I loved it there.
Yeah, let's actually get into that. I've never been there. How is life like there?
It's we lived in a town, so it's not like I was living out in the fields. You know what I'm saying? But certainly, for context, our town, which had about 45,000 people in it when I grew up in it, that's the second largest city in South Dakota. At 45,000.
Yeah, pretty small.
So you leave. I mean, no one's there in the grand scheme, and I loved it. I had a great childhood. Didn't have any complaints. It wasn't that, but I also wanted to go elsewhere. That was just sort of ingrained in me.
Would you say the youth in general had that feeling, or you?
I mean, some.
Were all your friends like me, and I can't wait to get out of this town?
Not necessarily. A fair amount were, but not everybody. You know what I'm saying? There was just some. There was just some with that a little more contentment to being there, staying near there. But I definitely sort of felt that I wanted to go away when the time came. So that was kind of part of my mind and part of what was going on in my head. And then I was really into science in school. I thought I'd go to the coast and be a marine biologist or a oceanographer or something that was like very exotic.
Yeah, because you don't even have
South Dakota. Yeah,
there's no ocean.
Yeah, so that's sort of those two things kind of were coalescing in my mind, or that sort of brought me out to when I had the opportunity to be able to come out to the West Coast is part of what led me to Seattle. So
interesting. So did you were you involved with sports in the high school level?
In high school I played soccer and ran track all the way through.
What events did you like in track?
I was a sprinter back in the day. So I would run 100 meters and 200 meters and relay teams and all that sort of stuff. So.
Yeah. It's so funny. Like we don't know each other, But what I'm finding is I was in Boy Scouts, you're in Boy Scouts.
Yes, fascinating.
I did track, you did track.
That's
so
really,
it's like
yeah.
different countries,
Yeah.
different worlds.
You're in the Philippines doing that?
Yeah, in the Philippines.
Yeah.
So it's like we have a lot more in common with someone more than you think, right? Like we don't know each other.
No.
but it's like, dude,
Find those
same thing,
similarities.
right?
Yeah, right on.
And so it's like that's kind of why I do this, because to let people know, like, as a country, a culture, sometimes we're so divided. When it's like, okay, well, let's go focus on what we actually have in common.
Sure.
Right? You have kids, I have kids.
Yep.
You did track, I did track.
Yeah,
and it's
really
just like all these things start stacking up, and you're like, it's just funny because it's like we have way more in common with some random stranger than you actually think you do.
Yep.
That's really funny. I used to rent a lot, and then I had to take a break because my feet hurt. And so last year I was like, I've got to figure this out because I want to be able to go. Like I was still active, but just not in the way I was used to.
Yeah.
And my kids were getting older, and I was the dad that was like, hey, go to the track and run. Because we'd all go to the track, but I was like, oh, I can't do anything. And so if I would tell my kids to run and they're like, this isn't very fun. The mom was walking, I was walking, and you tell them and they could maybe do half a lap.
Yeah.
So last summer I was like, all right, let's figure out if I can run without pain. So I was able to. And so we got into, I bet my boys, or not bet, but I told them, if you can beat me in a mile by this date, I'll give you, I don't know if it's $20,
Gotcha.
some dollar amount.
Yeah, sure.
So my 10-year-old, I ended up getting a mile in 6:22.
Yeah, well, yeah.
At 34.
Good for you.
And my 10-year-old did it in 5:52.
Yeah, awesome.
And then my 9-year-old did it in 6:18.
Yeah, fantastic.
And so happy for them. So this year I'm like, all right, I'm going to try it again. And so we just went out to the track recently, and my 11-year-old, after no training, did a 5:50.
Wow.
With no training.
That's great, though.
So I was like, great. I got some work to do. Absolutely. I'm trying to get under sub 6.
Yeah.
But it's because I'm out there doing it. Now they're, they run with me like yesterday, last night. We went running together.
Yeah, that's great.
And so it's one thing telling your child to do something.
Yep.
Even if you used to do it versus now, okay, dad's doing it. I'm going to go do it with him.
It. Yeah, absolutely.
So we looked around to see, our kids are homeschooled. So we look for different opportunities for them. So there's like actually here in Shoreline, there's like a local track you can come to, and anyone at all age can come compete. And so I may have them try that out to see.
Yeah, see if they respond to it.
Yeah, because they just have that. I mean, you remember racing where it's like the 200 and the 400, those are difficult races. And I think my kids, their main passion is basketball.
Okay.
Yep. But they're good at running, and I want them to experiment with different things and see how it goes with the track.
That's great.
I feel like if you can run that quickly without training, you could probably get pretty good. So
absolutely.
Yeah, that's funny. Do you remember your time? Any of your good times?
No, I'd have to.
Which one do you like better, the 1 or the 2?
I mean, I liked the 100 meters, but wasn't quite fast.
Yeah, it's a tough one because
fast kid, but I wasn't at fast enough. You know what I'm saying? So at the back in the day. So I like when I got older, we ran relays. I was running several different relays, and like those
relays are fun. Yeah,
just because there was like an element of team to it and individual performance. So, but yeah, that's interesting. Sort of have that in common.
Yeah. So I always ask this question to my guests because part of this, I know young people are going to watch this. And I think sometimes young people feel like you have to have all of life figured out. And so I asked my guest, when you were 18, finishing high school, it sounds like you had an idea, but you didn't quite know what it is you're going to do, but that didn't paralyze you. Because I think sometimes now people get paralyzed with the unknown. Yeah. And so let's dial into high school. You finished senior year. What was that thought process and your actions?
Yeah, I mean I definitely didn't know what I wanted to. Like I had this general idea, and was sort of lucky enough to be able to go somewhere else. In terms of had the opportunity.
Did you just apply to different colleges? Is that what happened?
So applied to a bunch of different places. It was almost random that I ended up coming out here, or it was not that I came here, but it was random that I applied. We didn't really have no connection to the state of Washington, nothing, no family or anything that was out here. But a friend of mine had told me about the University of Washington, and it was great. Whatever, sort of came well recommended. So I'm like, great, I'll add that to my list. Apply to it along with different places, and so then eventually, when I got accepted here and a few other places, and went on a tour, my dad took me, out here to the coast, and we looked at a few different schools, and came to UW. And I remember this very clearly because it was like middle of April. It was a gorgeous day. Seattle was beautiful. The campus was, everything was like the perfect Seattle, right? Not the, the truly perfect,
not the rain side. Yeah.
Like when we took a flight back, and it was like coming up through the clouds, and there's Mount Rainier and Mount St. All the, just everything. It was just really a really dramatic visit from that standpoint. And after that, I was just kind of like, oh, well, you know what, this looks great, and decided to do it, but really based on very little, in terms of my, compared to other paths I could have potentially taken.
Yeah. So you visited other colleges in other states as well.
Yeah. I mean, not everywhere, but I remember we looked at a school in Colorado, and I was looking at the schools in South Dakota too. But then, but it was coming down to whether I was going to go to Colorado or Washington, and decided to come to Washington, and sort of like, not quite to say it was on a whim is too narrow of a description.
Yeah.
But it also wasn't fully thought out. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It was somewhere in the middle.
And I like hearing that because, again, I think sometimes we get paralyzed with, like, well, what's the right one?
Yeah. Yeah, sure.
What's the best one? And it's like, I think if you would have gone to Colorado, you just would have had a different life.
Absolutely. Of course. Yeah.
I wouldn't say better or worse.
No, just different. And I personally, especially at that age, I really liked the idea of going where no one else was going. I didn't have a lot of the sort of that fear, or that you're, of like, I won't know anyone. I'm not going to, like.
So what did most of your peers end up doing when they graduated?
I mean, sort of all over the place. A lot went to school in South Dakota. Some didn't go to school or went to work, did different things. But then I had other friends that also went elsewhere, that went to Michigan or Arizona or, other places.
Yeah, it seems like college back then was really a way to get out of yourself.
Absolutely.
And maybe when we get to later on, we'll talk about college today and what your views are on it. But back then, like, college did make sense, I feel like.
Yep.
It was a way to get out, learn, and interact, and it wasn't that expensive.
Yeah,
like, it cost money,
right. Absolutely,
but it wasn't like an arm and a leg.
Nothing like it is today.
Yeah,
it still was expensive, but it's exponentially more today than it was.
So you come out to University of Washington. Did you have a major in mind?
At the start, it was marine biology is what I was hoping to do. So biology was where I started. That lasted about a year and a half.
You're like, oh, this ocean thing is not.
And part of it too. I regret these are things I regret, but I came to. I had a great experience at college. Loved it. Made tons of friends and had a blast.
So what? Let's maybe we'll answer that in a little bit. But
sure.
Back to the oceanography or marine biology.
So part of what happened was I wasn't getting good enough grades once I got into college. So
too much partying?
Essentially, yes. So so it forced me to sort of reevaluate my major, and so I made a change that turned out to be for the best. And and I'm very happy with everything.
Yeah.
But looking at it from looking back at that now, it definitely was it was my own fault as much as anything else. That I let grades slip and was having a little too much fun and didn't manage my own my own.
Was that because in South Dakota, I mean, part of it's just being youth, so maybe that could happen in any college.
Yeah.
But it's just, do you think it was more just youth than it was the location?
I think mostly that, yes. I mean, I had sort of had a...
Did you grow up pretty strict with rules, or?
I mean, yes.
And so college was just like, whoa, no rules.
It was definitely that. It was like a moment of like being free and discovering everything, and I also just was and, cocky, frankly, from the standpoint of like life had come pretty easy to me up to this point, or, I never really struggled in high school. Like when it comes to school,
Yeah.
got not the best grades, but pretty darn good grades without breaking much of a sweat. And so got to college and sort of had this assumption that it would be the same. It's not, it requires a far deeper level of dedication in order to do well. I wasn't doing that as a freshman, and suddenly, a year and a half later, like I said, sophomore year, realizing that I was not succeeding like I kind of assumed I would,
Yeah.
and I had to reorient, figure out what my next.
Yeah, it's like an athlete from a small town. They think they're amazing.
Sure, that's right. Yeah,
And then,
That's
dude,
very-
you're a big fish in a little
that's
pond.
right. You go play with the other guy, and it's a totally different. That's exactly it. It was just sort of a sort of a reckoning for me personally at that time. So.
Yeah. So it sounds like you made a switch your sophomore year into what?
Yeah. So I also, my interests were changing, so it wasn't 100%, but ended up moving into communications and speech communications. So sort of this analysis of interpersonal relationships and public speaking and sort of, facilitation and group management, group dynamics is the sort of stuff I ended up studying in school and really liked that. So second half of school roughly, or, was as I shifted into that degree was a much different experience in terms of the academics of it.
So with the communication degree, that was probably you had to get good at public speaking and
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. It was training in public like what the classes I was taking were things like rhetoric and sort of an analysis of speech writing, and group dynamics was a big part of it. Like, classes that analyze sort of how groups interact and how leadership comes from different groups and all those sorts of things. And the sort of interpersonal communication was a big part of it.
So you touched on something earlier about enjoying college. What do you think you got out of college other than just the academia? What were the other benefits of it?
Well, I mean, it's where I certainly made the best friends. Many lifelong friends from that period of my life that I'm still friends with, or still key parts of me. So that's probably it. But it was also that element of the independence, but then combining the independence with learning how to handle more responsibility in my life. So because I wasn't supervised and taken care of, I made many mistakes, but also learned from that experience, and it sort of forged me into a person that was able to handle responsibility.
Did you have a relationship with your professors back then?
That's a great question.
The reason why I asked that is my friend is now a professor. He just got his doctorate in plants, of all things.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And I was talking to him recently, and I was like, because I listen to a lot of podcasts. I like listening to people like yourself talk, and a lot of times they'll talk about how professor they interact with had this profound what a moment in their life. And then I was asking my friend, do you have interactions with your students? He's like, no.
Not like that. Yeah.
No.
Yeah. I can remember, I do remember a couple of professors. It's getting to be a long time ago now.
Yeah.
But that I did really like. I really appreciated what they brought to what I was learning. And so it's not that I didn't have.
Not that you're best friends with all your professors, but just
no. But there was many I didn't answer. Many that were just sort of servicing my needs. If that makes sense.
But just curious if there was a professor, because again, I'm thinking about, it sounds like some of your kids are in college. So I'm sure you've thought through the benefits of college.
Yes.
And I want to get to that later. But thinking about, okay, college is not the same product as it was 30 years ago, right? And so thinking through, what did you get? I went to college, got a master's, 2 masters actually, and thinking through, okay, that's what college did for you back then. And if we take that same lens to today, is it really providing the same thing? Like when I pay for something, am I getting the same thing?
That's right. It's a great question.
I don't quite think, and we'll hit on this more later, but I don't think we're getting the same return. Return on investment. So let's get there. But that's why I want to harp in on like, okay, what did college do for you? It's like, all right, I learned some stuff, made some friends.
Yep. I mean, the other thing, that's more difficult to define, but certainly, and this goes into there was a difference between the sort of the education I was receiving and the overall idea of being educated. You know, the sort of the holistic things I learned at college, the way that my worldview changed, the way that I gained a larger understanding of the world, the people I met, the people I had interacted with, my friends and others that I were interfacing with was much more multicultural, was much more just different than what I had experienced in this fairly insular environment in South Dakota. All those things affected me in ways that still affect me in terms of how I view the world.
Yeah.
That would be very different, no doubt, if I hadn't gone through that process, even though they're harder to specifically articulate.
Yes. Yes.
You know what I'm saying? But that overall education, like that global education I received during those years was pivotal, I think, in my own personal.
Yeah, and I think I would agree with that statement. Where back then, again, I wasn't around, but when I hear people talk about college back then, it's like, why would you not?
Yeah, sure.
Where
Sure.
today, it's like, why would
It's a much
you?
bigger debate. It's a much larger debate.
Especially with the cost.
Yeah.
So you finished college. Obviously, you're married. Did you meet your spouse then?
Met my spouse in college. We didn't get married right away, but we met at UW. Got out of college and was still fairly aimless, or I didn't go right to a job in my degree. I took a year sort of off, like not fully, but I was a big skier back in the day, and so I went and lived for a season down in Sun Valley, Idaho, so I could ski a bunch. Got a job waiting tables, and sort of did this sort of life for a while, and then came back. So I was down there for a year.
I like that gap idea.
Yeah, me too. I'm a big fan of it.
Where sometimes we think like, again, I try to put myself in being someone in your 20s. Not every moment of your life has to be optimized.
That's right. That's right. Yep.
And so that gap year, a lot of times people do it after high school or maybe after college, because it's like
or whatever.
you don't have to go straight into earning
That's right.
top dollar, or even we love this hustle culture where it's like everything you do needs to be hustle, and it's like, no, take a moment in time to learn and understand yourself.
Yep.
While maybe doing something fun.
That's right.
It sounds like you had that gap year.
That's exactly what it was, and it was. I also wasn't sure at that.
How did that? What made you do that, or is it more accidental that you're just like?
It was. It was a little bit serendipity of what was people I had met at the time. In terms of like, so from my parents' history, my dad back in the 60s had done a similar thing. So, and sort of encouraged it, just like you're saying, like recognized there's value in taking a gap year. He had, back in the 60s, he had hitchhiked across the country one summer and was a ski bum in Aspen, Colorado for a winter before he went on to graduate school and did other things. And so that was sort of in the back of my mind, or that, to sort of try and recreate that or do something like that. And then just as it happened, people I'd met, there was an opportunity some friends who were, it was actually a friend of my girlfriend at the time, my now wife, who was living down there. They had an extra room. I didn't have a job, was looking for something to just do that was fun.
Yeah. And you didn't, the other thing you didn't have is probably crippling debt.
That's right. No, I mean, I would absolutely. I was.
Where kids today, when they're graduating,
that's right. Yeah.
It's crippling.
Absolutely. Definitely. Yeah. So, so just was able to do that. And I wasn't sure if I was going to go, back to South Dakota, or I didn't really think I would ever move back to South Dakota to live there.
Yeah.
But I wasn't sure I was going to stay in Seattle either. I was just kind of feeling it out, and so all those things combined for that.
Did the unknownness ever stress or worry you? Or is it just like at that point you just accepted that's just life? Exactly.
I mean, a little bit to a fault, I would not worry about those things back in that time. I mean, I do now, but as a 20-something kid, I was like, I came out to college with no connections and this great unknown. And then when college got over, I moved down there. It was a great unknown, but I never really lost sleep over that component of it. at the time like I might now or might
Yeah.
later in life.
Well,
So,
I tell people sometimes you just have to live life.
yeah,
Like
sure.
take one step, take a half a step. You may not know 10 steps down the road,
Mm-hmm.
but in the doing of life, you'll meet someone.
Mm-hmm.
Here's a really common occurrence, and you said it yourself, random, you had a random experience, a random
Mm-hmm.
things a friend of yours like, hey, go check out UW. That's random, right? And I see that so often in people's experiences in life is I met this person, I had a conversation that I did not plan,
Mm-hmm.
which then changed the trajectory of my
Yeah.
life. It's a very common thing. And so I look at today's society and we hear of the proverbial person living in their mom's basement,
Yeah. Right.
right?
Right.
And it's like, if you are, I'm not saying that's wrong, but if you are living in your mom's basement, when are you actually living life? When are you setting yourself up for an opportunity to experience that randomness?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Or if most of your life is online, right?
That's
Oh,
right.
poor
Yeah.
me. The guy I met at the sauna, his son is 30, living with them with crippled, maybe he has some mental issues.
Okay.
I'll
Yeah.
say that.
Yeah.
But it's like you have a degree. You are obviously intelligent enough to go get a degree, but you're still living with them at 30. They're trying to kick you out because
Right.
it's like, dude, you're 30. We're in our 70s. We're not going to be around forever.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so for that 30-year-old, it's like I was talking to the dad in the 70s, and he's like, one time we said something to him, just trying to like, just be like, what are you doing with your life? And he was so offended that he went into his room for 2 days and didn't come out.
Yeah.
And it's like, again, I'm not going to say that's right or wrong, but just like, hey, when are you getting outside of yourself?
Yeah. Sure.
He won't even go get an interview because he thinks it won't go well. And it's like, dude, you're just not setting yourself up for success.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
With you, it's like, I didn't worry about it. And I like hearing those stories because just to let young people today know, it wasn't that like young people 20 years ago, 30 years know what they're doing. They were just living life.
Yeah. Sure.
Right?
Sure.
And that's what you're doing. You're living life. You didn't have it all figured out.
Yep.
But you went and like, oh, I met this person. Oh, I'm going to go do this.
Mm-hmm.
Was it the best? Was it the right? You don't know. You're just taking that step. And I think that's the message I'm trying to get across to young people.
Yeah.
It's not that most people don't have life figured out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Most people, okay, so if you're fortunate enough to know that your calling in life, like, I want to be an astronaut, I'm going to spend all my energy in becoming an astronaut. Cool.
Fantastic. Yeah.
But even it's funny, as I learn more about people, the people that find their calling younger in life and then fulfill it, like let's say an athlete becomes a NBA player or baseball player, and then they like at 26, they get injured or they can no longer do it. They're peaked because there was like all their energy went into that.
Yeah.
And now they're like, now what?
Next? Yeah.
Right? And so even the guy that knows what he wants to do, and there's like an astronaut becomes an astronaut, he peaks, and then he's like, I went to the moon at 40. Now what am I supposed to do with the rest of my life?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And so even having that grand thing is great, but you still have to do the little things. And I think that's what we're missing out on.
Yeah. Interesting.
There's the little things in life that you still got to do.
Yep.
It's cool if you have a, I call big P, which is big purpose. And then there's little P's, right? Going to the gym. There's all these little things that we do. And I had this idea recently where obviously I didn't make it up myself, but I don't play video games, but when you play video games, there's different levels, right? Mm-hmm. And then you get to the boss. So you think of life as purpose. Okay, if you started a video game, right, and you had to play the boss at the first level, you get crushed, right? Because your player doesn't have the skills, you don't have the skills.
Up everything, yeah.
Right? The boss would just crush you.
Yeah.
So if you got your big purpose at 21, you probably wouldn't have the skills to go do that purpose. That would just crush you. And so sometimes we're like, I need that big purpose in life. It's like, dude, are you doing the basics? Right? And we can argue what those basics are, but I think there's just commonalities. Like, are you taking care of your body, right? If you are not sleeping well, you're extremely overweight, you don't exercise, you eat poorly. Those are all little purposes, right?
Sure.
But it's like, well, I don't have my big purpose. Well, it's like, well, you're not even doing like the
Yeah.
basic functions,
Yeah.
right? And that's something part of this podcast for me. It's okay. What are some of these common principles that people could do, should do to lead to a higher quality of? Because I don't know, I can't tell you what your purpose in life is, but I can at least tell you here's some little things you can do, right?
Yeah.
But I like hearing that from you. You're like, I didn't really know, but it didn't paralyze me to just do nothing.
Well, and the other part of it, I mean, so the other thing that for me, but also just to, when we talk about this in big pictures, that wasn't happening in a vacuum. In my personal case, my girlfriend, my wife, she was much more linear in terms of just the nature of, she got out of college, got the job,
And that's great. That's okay too.
Yes, and
Yeah.
so I mean, and so she was much more like marching forward, while I was in this kind of just rambling man stage.
When you were down skiing and were you still dating her?
We still did, yes.
When was she like getting on you, like figure it out, or was she just?
I mean, kind of. She wasn't getting on me, but it was becoming an issue in our relationship that we were just in different phases at that point. And in that it was something we had to navigate. You know, it was a big part of how are we compatible ultimately. You know, is figuring out that, you know, and I mean, I'm glad that she was that way.
Yeah,
It also helped bring me a little bit back towards, from rambling too far.
Right. Yeah. If ever in your life has no whatever.
And so, but it definitely was. You know, that was a big part of our life, was figuring out those things, and you know, how they lined up and how they didn't, and all.
When you were dating, was there a time when you knew you were going to marry her?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's difficult to say when that first.
Well, like when you were skiing, did you know I'm going to marry this girl?
Not then. I think that was still very much the jury's out period for both of us, probably. You know, but as that specific period ended, and I moved back to Seattle, and sort of restarted my life here, that's when it sort of crystallized, I think, for both of us. And, you know, I mean, and that would have been, like, to put some years on that, that would have been 1995, and we got engaged in 97. So, you know what? So it was like that. It was those next couple of years, 95 to 97, when I was living here.
Yeah. So let's talk about that phase of your life. So now you're almost mid-20s. It sounds like.
Yep. It was 25.
What was life like then?
And so I still, I mean, so some of that rambling element was hard to shake then too, you know. So I came back here, still didn't know exactly what I wanted to do in terms of like a career, and so was working, but still just jobs, not career, you know. And so from that standpoint, I waited tables again, and I did different things that, you know, was trying to figure out that my sort of development, I think, from that standpoint was a little stunted because I had not been paying attention to, you know, I went through a period where I wasn't even making goals for myself or identifying anything that I wanted to achieve. I was just letting life happen, which had many positives to it, but the negative was to get out of it, it's hard to get out of that.
Yeah.
And so that's a lot of what that period was for me. When it came to work, you know, and at the same time, my relationship with Sherry is evolving. You know, we're getting ready to get married, or, you know, just all that sort of stuff was happening at the same time. I eventually got a job, and I can't remember exactly where this is in the timeline, but a friend of mine worked for a tech company in Bellevue, and got me a job. This is right in the middle of sort of .com boom. Everything is, you know, also tech explosion in Seattle or in everywhere. But so I got a job at a small tech firm over in Bellevue, not as a sort of middle manager administrator type. And that career, that place basically was where I ended up working for the next 8 years, and sort of worked up through the ranks at that company, and thought for a time that that's where I was going to be. that I was, was going to be in the tech industry, even though I had no tech background, but that became the sort of next phase career-wise, until sort of 2003, 2004 was from 97, 98 to 2003 or so.
Did you have any, you got married during that time?
Yep, that's right.
And then you grew up a little bit, now you're early 30s.
Yep, and we had a kid. We had our first baby, but in that same era. I mean, and so this leads to my big career change, which was in 2004 or so when I started to do what I'm doing now. But it was over that period that sort of came to recognize a few things. One, I had moved into tech in part because everybody was in tech, but I didn't have any core interest in the technology. I wasn't a coder or a database guy. I didn't have any of that real core interest in what the actual work was.
Yeah.
I ended up becoming a sort of middle manager. I managed a team. It was a training company that I worked for. So we had technical trainers, guys that would go to other companies and teach them how to code or to use SQL Server or whatever. These, Visual Basic Programming, something or other, was what the service that the company offered. But even then, I couldn't fully articulate all those things. I knew what they were as products that the company was offering, but I wasn't fundamentally invested in the actual service. And so it was as I came to recognize that, I sort of knew it the whole time, but as I articulated it to myself, sort of recognizing I shouldn't be in this industry, or just because I'm not fundamentally getting any sort of, it's not enjoyment, that's not right, but sort of the fulfillment of being in an industry that I was down.
Did you have that process during it, or are you thinking back on it like as an older man now? You're able
to little bit of both. It's fully articulated now as I look back, but it was enough of a recognition, and in discussions with my wife over those years, or the later part of those years.
And was she always working during that time?
She was working separate industry. She was in sort of in credit unions and banking is where her, and so, but together we're recognizing that I wasn't, wasn't happy in the job, even though my job itself was great. The people I worked with were great. It was a good company. All that sort of stuff was good, but I wasn't happy, and sort of as we came to recognize that as a couple, as a team, that's when we started contemplating that there should be a change. That's
an important. I don't know how many people would A, recognize it, and B, be willing to make a change.
Yes, yeah,
because it's like I'm sure you're making decent money.
That's right. That it was a big move for us. The other thing about those years, though, that I now sort of look back and chuckle at, but is that was the .com boom right there. Like 93 to 2000.
Amazon, Microsoft, all this.
And people. I had a gal that I worked with who was like my first boss at that company, but she was at the company because she had sold her little company to them. And she retired 3 years later as a multimillionaire at age 36. That sort of stuff was happening near me. This is important. Near me, but not to me or with me. I was not, in part because I wasn't fully committed to the idea of the tech. There's another universe where I could have potentially taken some risks and joined a startup, and done some other things that might have resulted in
multi-million
and also money. But it's sort of, I joke now that the .com boom sort of brushed right by me. It was close enough I could sort of reach out and touch it, but I was never in the river. I was never in that world.
One of my professors, she was somewhere around 100th employee in Amazon.
Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm.
But because it was back then so stressful, work-life balance was terrible.
Mm-hmm.
I think she was just out of college, where she was working 80 to 100 hours a week.
Yeah, sure.
And it's like hindsight, man, if you would have just stuck around,
exactly,
you would have been worth
exactly.
I don't know if hundreds of millions, but definitely millions.
But yes, I've
she didn't last very long. It was just like, man.
Yep.
Because it's like, yes, we know about the Amazon, but how many other companies failed?
Yes, totally.
Right?
No, that's right.
So we forgot to mention that part. It's like, yeah, a lot of people start startups.
And then they didn't work or
And
whatever.
then, so who would, like,
The,
who was to know that this little bald guy, I don't know if he was bald back then, but
right.
a little nerdy guy back then,
Yes, exactly.
would have been able to start this $1 trillion company.
Yeah, I have a good friend who started at Microsoft in like 1989. So very similar. I mean, it wasn't 100 employees, but it wasn't
Yeah.
50,000. He was a very early Microsoft employee, ground
Yeah,
level.
he was doing pretty well.
And doing pretty well for himself, right? I mean, it'd be
and some of that.
So,
and like some of life is just luck,
of course,
right?
No, that's right. That's right.
I'm finding the people that even the people who are successful can realize like there's a lot of luck involved, right? Sure. I mean, there's luck in being born in America versus Africa in the desert, right?
Yep. 100%.
And that guy in Africa could be smarter than you.
That's right.
He just doesn't have
never has the opportunity.
Yeah,
it's purely
And so I also look at my life and my kids, and it's like appreciate a lot of the stuff I don't control. So knowing that, like, yes, there are things I control, but just literally, you could be the mail guy at Amazon, employee 50, and
that's right.
You're not the smartest dude. You're just literally in the right place
at the right time. Exactly. So
yeah, that's interesting. So I'm curious, that lady that was your boss, have you seen what ended up with her life?
I mean, we haven't spoken in many years now, but we have stayed in touch. I mean, she got out. She basically cashed out.
What did she end up doing with her life?
I remember she moved to Nevada. She moved down to like Lake Tahoe area. And
do you think she lived the life that she wanted?
I mean, I think so. I think so. She was working with like dog rescue, I think, and doing some sort of good works around there, living in a lovely home on the shores of Lake Tahoe, and you know what I'm saying. It seemed like she did it right.
Yeah, it's like if you can get wealth at a young age, there's a lot of. Even last night I was talking to my wife about like, we have 4 kids now. We're not super rich. We're not super poor.
Yeah.
But it'd be funny to get wealthy in our 40s when our kids are gone, because it'd been like, man, it would have been nice to have this wealth.
Absolutely.
I was like, what would you do if like we had $1 million in the bank? And she was like, I don't know.
Yeah. No,
like,
I know what you mean.
With having kids, it's like, all right, cool, we can go do all these fun things. But then we got wealthy once they were all gone. She was like, I would just probably spend it on things.
Yeah.
So it was just funny. It's like, man, it would be nice to have wealth.
Yeah.
Because when you have wealth, excessive wealth, when I say excessive, just a lot, you're able to just, money doesn't buy happiness, but you can go buy experiences.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And, we live a good life now, but it'd be ironic to
absolutely
get extreme. Like, it's that guy that's like in his 70s driving a sports car around. I was like, dude, that would have been cool in your 20s. Exactly. But like, now you're just compensating. Right. Yeah. Like, no one thinks you're cool.
Yeah, right.
Because you're driving a $150,000 car.
Yeah.
But so you decided to make that career switch.
Yeah. So effectively that what was going on is sort of recognized. Check it.
Yeah, I always double check to make sure.
No problem.
Did you see a therapist at all during that time, during that discontent, or was it really just communication with your wife?
Yeah, it was mostly just my wife.
Because I think I think a lot about therapy. I went and had that podcast with a therapist, and so I'm not anti-therapy, but I don't know if everyone needs a professional therapist. If you have someone in your life that can help reason with you.
Yep. Yeah. And that's I would agree with that. And I certainly didn't. I mean, it never crossed my mind at the time. It was just sort of trying to figure out, how to, my wife was good at pointing out things that, where I wasn't happy and sort of as that coalesced into, let's see if we can find a career that provides more fulfillment. And that's important, I think. Also now looking back, is it's not so much the quest for a job that is fun all the time. And unfortunately, my job is often.
Yeah, we're going to get to that.
But but it's more just fulfillment. Like, do I like being a part of it? Am I happy to be a part of what I'm doing? And I wasn't before. And so, decided to make change. And basically what had happened in our lives, we'd had our first child, and we had we have two kids, or we have three kids there, and the first two are 2 years apart. It was the year in between. So when we had a 1-year-old at home, we were just about to get pregnant, or we were in going to have another baby soon. Basically, in that era was when we really started to get into it and recognize either I make a change now, or we might not ever. In terms of like, it's already almost too late. We've got a family, we've got lots of responsibility and all that sort of stuff. But if we were to sort of take a chance on moving into some other industry or some other career path, that I'd better get on it. And so
it's also helpful that your wife had a job.
Yeah, and that's right. And so so that was the other part. She was working regularly, so it gave me a soft landing.
Yeah,
we were able to sort of in the short term, basically just planned it from that standpoint. It was like, okay, I'm going to leave that career behind, middle of the year or whenever it was. And then, and I had started, so what was going on in my head was I wanted to find something that I liked, or that I'd find more fulfillment. I had sort of, I had some experience in video production. And so that was...
How did you get that experience?
I mean, both just from personal projects I'd worked on and a number of different things. And we also had some stuff at my old job where there was video work that was being done that I've just touched a little bit. It was...
So this is kind of a side question. Did you have hobbies back then?
Oh,
outside of work?
Sure. Absolutely. I mean, still do. But yeah, I love to ski in the winter. We'd still camp and do other things like that in the summertime.
The reason why I ask is I believe people should have hobbies. And I was talking to a guy the other day and asked him if he had any hobbies. Married, couple kids. He said no.
Yeah. I'm like, oh man, yeah.
But he was like, I don't need hobbies. And then what he said, I don't know if I should say this, but he was like, my hobby is making love with my wife. I was like,
good for you, dude. Yeah.
Cool. For me though,
yeah.
Like, I know I could go to the gym without needing someone else to
to participate.
to participate. And so it's like, that would be really sad if I had to call the gym every day and be like, are you open today? Can I work out? And so I was just like, hey, God bless you if you don't need a hobby, but I'd help you. Like, I look at, because I'm probably at that age where you almost made that transition, right? In your 30s. And I look at a lot of my friends in their 30s right now who, like, I have a buddy that works a ton of hours, and we look at his life and it's like, he has no hobbies. So I look at a lot of married men in my age group, they don't have hobbies. And it's not that you should have a hobby, but it's just like, for me, it's like, I think it's very rare in life when every aspect of your life is going well. If it is, great. Like, that's fantastic.
But that's the short period.
Right. And so for me, it's like, okay, if my marriage maybe today isn't great, but at least I went to the gym and I had fun. Or if my job isn't the super funnest, well, at least I have this other podcast. Right. So it's like, so it's like, for a lot of my guys that I know my age, it's like work sucks, marriage sucks, their whole life sucks. And it's like, for me, it's like, even if there's other areas of my life that aren't going as optimal or as well, it's like, it's okay. Cause it's like, at least I'm going to go do this that's fun, or at least I'm going to go do this that's fun. And so I find that the guys that don't have those hobbies, life can get really sad, really depressing, because they're the only things in their life are not going well. Because it's obviously, you want every day of marriage to be great, but there's days that aren't. And at work, it's very rare that every day is amazing.
Absolutely.
And so that's why I'm a huge fan of having a hobby. But if his was making love with his life, it's like, That's cool, man.
Yeah, exactly. That's
But that for me, I
maybe
could,
there's something else. Also, even also, yeah.
yeah. So that was funny. That's why I asked, like, did you have hobbies outside
Yeah.
that?
Well, and one of the things we were doing a lot back in those days is I had with a group of buddies, we would make videos sort of for each other. Like today, it would be YouTube videos
Yeah.
we were doing, you know. But so we did a bunch of those making videos for each other as everyone was getting married. We'd do these sort of parodies and fun things, but just the process of making them was really fun.
Yeah.
So so that was sort of part of my life too, or, you know, it's part of what was going on. But so as I made as I quit the tech job, didn't really know if it would like sort of video production was like one path. Also was trying to figure out what else there might be, and applying to different places and just trying to feel my way. I ended up so then it was just sort of luck again. You know, I mean a little bit of this sort of I had a couple of sort of corporate style video clients that I was doing sort of low end video work for that was giving me this little tiny income stream. You know, that was like an exploring whether that was something that was worthwhile to do. And but while that was occurring, I was also just really networking in the sort of film and video world. And
So that was kind of like your hobby.
yeah,
That was a hobby.
exactly. So you know, and now even after I'd quit, so now I'm actively searching for something. And had a little bit of the video production.
This is early 2000.
This would have been 2004, early 2005, and but also was networking. Just sort of like found this was like the early days of message boards and stuff, you know. And so from that, you know, found like sites where they were posting, oh, we're making a short film. We need volunteers to help with this or that, you know, and a few different projects that I'd volunteered on to meet people and to start to get to know what was going on in the world. And as it happened, on one of those jobs, it was a short film that was being made by a young gal who was a recent graduate of a film school, and she asked me if I could. She said, "I need help with finding the locations for this project." Right. So
How did you know this girl? Just random.
I met her through, I think, a friend of a friend. I can't remember exactly.
So it was one of those random,
But yes, I mean
something
sort of-
you couldn't have planned.
That's right. You know, basically, like she was looking for people to help her make her short film. I volunteered to do that. But so I remember going to meet her and just kind of having coffee, and she said, "That'd be great. I'd love it if you'd help. We'll figure out where I can use you." You know, as she was trying to figure out building her sort of crew and her team of people to do this for her with her, and it was in those sort of meetings then as there was maybe 10 of us at one point that were getting together and trying to plot out how we're going to go about it. And she asked me if I could help her find the locations for it. So because she had a script she had written, it was this sort of this humorous little script for a short 10-minute movie that involved two neighbors on a cul-de-sac that hate each other. Okay, that was the comedy of the bit was the two neighbors that hate each other, right? So what the story required was two houses next to each other on a cul-de-sac, but also that the specifics of it were just a little bit technical because there was a key scene in the story where one of the neighbors backs out of his driveway and crashes into the garbage cans of the other neighbors, causing a fight. Okay. So the actual layout of the driveways had to be correct to make that make sense. Can you follow what I'm saying?
Yeah. I live in a cul-de-sac.
Yeah. So they couldn't be two driveways that were like this. They had to be where the driveways were that action.
That's actually my cul-de-sac. My neighbors, they're cul-de-sac.
They sort of, you had to cut, you know, so anyway, this was the nature of what it was. And then she had other needs. She wanted it to be sort of mid-century looking, not too wealthy, you know, list of descriptions of like what the characters in her story, what their houses would be like. And so she said, "Can you help me find that? Can you help me get that?" You know? And so I just sort of did it. I went, looked at different neighborhoods, different cul-de-sacs. I live on a cul-de-sac too now, but so, just like trying to find where that was, that neighborhoods that gave her the look she wanted, the right level of sort of the vibe of the neighborhood. And then, but then I had to convince the homeowners to let us film a movie on their property.
Yeah, I was curious. How did that? So you were like, "Hey,
Yeah. So
like someone could just come up and be like, hey, just like I randomly came up to you."
Ultimately, it was that. So
Were you the one that initially broached that
yep,
conversation?
yep. I knocked on the door.
So just like how I randomly approached you, you randomly
very much
approached.
so. And I mean, like part of what I learned, and now I don't remember on that first project versus later projects where I do the same sort of thing. But but I'd often now when I do the same sort of work, I'll write a letter, just a simple little letter that I can leave on the stoop. So and so, but in any case, though, ultimately it's a cold interaction, and that's what I did in that one. Knocked on a door, guy opens the door. I give him a quick spiel of what I've said. Hey, I'm not selling anything, and not what you think I am.
It's like what I'm doing when I talk to people. It's so funny.
I'm just like, hey, so we actually want to shoot a movie, maybe here at your place. What do you think? Just sort of had to pitch them on the idea, and so did that a few different times to varying levels of success. Sometimes no success at all, right? And then,
are you telling them there's financial gain in it right away?
So in that case, there wasn't.
Oh,
so this was we're all volunteering our time. We're trying to find someone that would be willing to volunteer their house. So now I do. When I work on larger stuff, absolutely, I talk compensation very early in the conversation. But in this case, I just needed to sort of pitch the dude. The homeowner, and I managed to make a connection with this guy. And it was a house in Bothell. I forget why I was in Bothell, but made a good connection. He liked the idea. He was a movie buff. Just sort of was able to get him sort of to join the team.
Yeah.
And then he helped me. He said, "Okay, well, if we're going to do it, then you need a neighbor." So he helped introduce me to his neighbor, and went and talked to the neighbor. Had the same sort of pitch, and just talked them through the process, and managed to convince these two homeowners to let the movie.
Wow, that makes it seem like what I'm asking isn't that crazy.
Yeah,
you're like, hey, let me just take over your house.
Yeah,
I'm just trying to ask for 2 hours of someone's time.
That's right. So
that's funny.
But was able to do it. It was very successful in the end. So got these two houses. Yeah. There was a lot more that went into it, but that was the gist of it.
So how long did that set take?
So what it involved, we shot it over a weekend.
Did you like put them in a hotel or something?
So I think we did. Yes, I'm trying to remember now. We maybe at least one of them did. As I recall, one house we needed the inside and the outside. And then the other one was just the outside. So I think that we put the one neighbor up, or the one homeowner in a hotel, the other ones were able to stay home. But we just made sure that their cars were out of the driveway and whatever else,
Would something like that still happen today?
Absolutely.
Really?
Yeah. So
there's a 0.00001% chance someone may knock on my door.
Absolutely. I still do it all the time.
Really?
I still do it now. I mean, that same process I do every year, multiple times a year.
You haven't knocked on my door.
I know.
I'm offended.
You never know. You never know.
I'm offended.
Yeah.
That's super interesting.
But that's what led to. So we shot that at that.
Can I still go watch that movie? Do you know what it was called?
Yeah. You just made it slip my mind. Just right. It's going to come to me later in the conversation. Then
just randomly say it when it comes to you.
Sly Dog. It was called
Sly Dog. Was it a full movie?
It was 10 minutes.
10 minutes.
Short. Like that. She used it and submitted it to film festivals and things as kind of
proof of concept. Like
yeah, that sort of thing. And so, but I remember the I don't know if this will mean anything to you, but the big name actor in it. There wasn't really a super big name, but it was a guy that from my generation, I knew him. There was a TV show back in the 70s and 80s called WKRP in Cincinnati. It was a sitcom, just sort of a lame sitcom.
Yeah.
But one of the guys from that show who was now living here in Seattle and was an old man at that point. Played one of the two actors. So that was my first kind of actor that I met, the celebrity, quote unquote, that I'd met.
Interesting. Man, that's so interesting. Like, again, we don't even know each other, but it's like just us interacting, your story, how you randomly go to people.
Yeah.
That's probably why you're open to have a conversation with me, because you're like,
could be. I didn't even think of it that way, but probably
you're just like, dude,
I do it all the time.
I do this all the time, and it's like, for me, it's like I get a lot of no's.
Yeah, absolutely. So
right.
do I.
For every yes I get, it's like people don't realize.
Of course,
I get a lot, and so it's like, and I'm curious. Selfishly, it's like some people aren't like, you'll have that initial conversation with, and you kind of know right from the beginning if it's going to work or not.
Absolutely. Yes.
And you don't necessarily have to sell them on it. Like, there's some people you're just not going to sell on the idea.
That's right.
So you don't even waste your time.
That's exactly right.
And because there's some, like, just like with me and you, I just find what I found with what I'm trying to do is, and I was literally, who was I? I was having a conversation. Someone I was having a conversation with, today I was having a conversation with someone at the gym who had already done a podcast with me. And I was like, age 30 to 50, it's a much harder sell for them to sit down with me. So I know I have to build a lot more rapport with that person.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Thankfully, I go to the gym every day.
And see them.
So that naturally you build that rapport. But I have very high success with someone in their 70s.
Yeah, interesting.
Where I can cold meet someone on a Thursday, just like what I did with you. I met him on a Thursday. Hey, I think you're an interesting person. I don't know you, but I think you probably have an interesting story. And then on Tuesday, I'm in his house.
Yeah.
2.5 hours.
Chatting him up. Yeah.
Where much harder to do with the 40, 50-year-old.
Yeah.
Right? Because they're still in the thick of life. They're still playing the game. Yeah. But I have also encountered 70-year-olds that aren't going to do it. But I know initially, right from the beginning, within that first, I was literally listening to a podcast today about marriage today. Or it's a book, the Gotams. They're probably the most researched couple that have ever done research into marriage.
Okay.
They actually set up a studio in Seattle where they invite couples to come so they can watch couples like live in a fake studio for 2 days. So they're measuring them. They're doing probably they're at least in their 60s or 70s now. So for 30 plus years, they've been studying the concept of marriage, and he has a 92% accuracy on whether a couple is going to get divorced. Because he studied the science behind it. So I'm listening to their books now.
Fascinating.
But he says literally within the first 3 minutes of any fight or any conversation, he can tell you how that's going to go. So he's basically, it's not that the conflict is bad. It's how those first 3 minutes will expose so much of it. Yeah. So super interesting though in your line of work, where you randomly just go up to people.
No, that totally. Well, and that like basically that job then led to people I met on that job. Then there was another project that was happening a few weeks later that I did the same thing for, and it was a different. It wasn't residential anymore. They were like, it was the same type of thing. It was this little student project that wanted to shoot down on one of the piers down near where the Great Wheel is now in downtown Seattle, like the waterfront, Seattle's waterfront. And so they wanted to shoot on the pier, but needed to figure out how can we do that? What sort of permission do we need? And so I got in. I just had never done it before, but started to learn the process of how do you get a permit in the city of Seattle to film. And so did that for them, just for another little project that was like that.
This is why you're still working your 9 to 5.
It is not.
Okay, you had quit the 9 to 5.
I had quit, and so
now you kind of want this to work.
That's right. I mean, but I didn't know, like, what I wanted to work was filmmaking. I was like, man, this sounds great. I'd love to be a part of either making movies or TV shows or whatever it is, But
so do you have a YouTube channel?
I don't. No. Yeah, exactly. Back in the day, I would have. But it's but it was this location scouting and the locations, the aspect of finding the locations that I ended up doing more than once, kind of in a row, because I did the first one well. Then the next guy said, "I heard you did a good job on Sly Dog. Can you come help me with my project?" And so I helped him with his project. And then the next guy was like, "I've heard great things." Or because of these two things, and so that led to
you're the guy that got things done.
Yeah,
and that's what people want.
And it was like in that little trajectory, it was the third one where I finally got paid. I did 2 for free. The third one I might as well have been free. It was I got a
you showed proof of concept and
and to be able to do it, and so and through all of that was just learning the process of location scouting for film and what that required, and like things like the other part of it that I learned quickly, and I'm still learning as I.
So for the listener, what is it exactly that you do now?
Sure. So I am a location scout and a location manager.
What's your title? It's on a business card.
Yeah, I mean that's what it says. It says location scout and manager for film and TV projects here in Washington State. So I still do what I was doing on that Sly Dog job,
Just
which is
20 years later.
I find locations for film projects and help them help whatever that project is film on location. And so now I do it for a everything from Hollywood level movies and television shows to TV commercials and anything else that sort of has a camera here in Seattle or in Washington State. So
Yeah, so that's super interesting. So you got paid on your third one, and then you just got more and more referral business, and then
yes, in the meantime, I was also trying to figure out if there was some other. I didn't know that location scouting.
that was a job.
Yeah, exactly. Literally didn't know it was a job.
Yeah.
And so I was also working with. I'd found another connection. I did some work with a company that was producing children's videos, kind of Sesame Street type stuff with puppets, and so was sort of helping them do that, and we thought maybe that was going to be, maybe I would go into sort of children's broadcasting vibe. It was another.
I mean, you have small kids at the time, so
Exactly.
I can see why.
That's exactly right. And so it was just basically like trying to find anything within film and video where I could forge a career, but over time, gradually came to realize that the location scouting component it was this niche market within film.
Yeah, how many in the state?
So
It's quite niche.
yeah, exactly. So here in Washington State, there's maybe, I'd say a maximum of 10 people that do the job that I do.
Yeah. So you want to go niche.
That's right. And so it was definitely like there was room for me, in terms of the job. And so gradually just sort of kept doing more and more of that and working on larger and larger and more complex projects. What I learned later or over that process is the actual scouting, the finding two houses that are next to each other type of work is only half of it, because the other half is then figuring out all the logistics of bringing a film crew into an environment where they aren't normally supported. So like even that first one, to go back to Sly Dog, that same thing. So we not only had to talk the two neighbors into letting us use their property, but then the film crew itself is 50 people, 60 people that's coming with truckloads of equipment. So we had to figure out where everything's going to park, and
so you were the guy that
we're going to use, and
you were that guy that had to
that's right.
figure all that stuff out.
The logistics of it. That's the location management part of the job. When I say I'm a location scout and a location manager, management is handling all of the nuts and bolts of bringing a film crew onto location. And so that same process that I did on that first job is what I'll still do for a television show, for whatever it might be, that has 150 people and semi trucks worth of equipment that need to come on, or that we need to control traffic, where, if we're doing something with vehicles that are driving through downtown Seattle and we need a police escort, or we need to close city blocks in order to do it. All of the mechanics of like figuring all that out, getting the permissions that we need, coordinating with the police or the fire department or the whomever else it requires. That's a huge part of the job now, not just finding the person.
Yeah, I just always assume most things are on set, but it sounds like
exactly.
A lot of stuff is done in real world.
A lot of stuff is done. Yeah, it's always a mix on bigger projects, the things that are done within a controlled studio environment and done on location. But when they're on location, they have me or someone like me that is helping them sort of wrangle all of those details.
Yeah, so let's go into. There's a few other topics I want to talk about. Being a father, but in your 40s, you're still doing the job. Seem to be enjoying it, and I think what's cool about your job is it's novel. Every project is novel, and
That's
I think
right. Yep.
with most jobs that we do, it gets very boring and very mundane because it's the same thing every day.
Yep.
And with your project, it's the same concept, but it's a novel.
That's right. It's one of the things I like a lot about
Yeah, and it's with the podcasting, with what I'm doing. It's the same concept, talking to a
Mhm.
stranger, but it's novel in that every stranger has a different story,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And so
Yep.
that's why I don't think I'll get bored of it unless I just get tired of human beings.
Yeah.
If I get tired of human beings, there's other areas I
Yeah.
need to
That's
figure
what I need to
out.
focus on. Yeah. Yeah.
But that's what I enjoy. It's like it's the novelty of we had no idea. Like
Mm-hmm.
I had no idea how this conversation was going to go.
Mm-hmm.
It's super interesting to hear your story, and I think that's probably some of the joy you get out of what you're doing.
Yeah.
Is it's
Absolutely.
novel, right?
That's right. Yep.
Here is the parameters, but the novelty of problem
That's right.
solving.
The specifics of what I'm asked to find, the places that I'm is different almost every time, and then the problems or what I have to overcome in that given circumstance
Yeah.
is different every single time.
When I think when most people they look at their job and it's the same problem that they have to solve every day, or it's not even a problem.
Yeah, no, right.
That gets pretty.
Up a waterfall type of thing where you're never gaining any ground on any.
I think the problem that most people have to solve is how to climb the corporate ladder.
Yeah, sure.
And I think most people, I can see why people are quietly quitting, or we hear all these terms today, and it's like because they're not living a very fulfilled life.
Yeah, right.
Right.
No, I understand that.
And it's not even about being an entrepreneur. There's a whole thing about being an entrepreneur. It's like it's not even not everyone needs to be an entrepreneur. It's just, are you solving problems? And are you having new things introduced to your life?
Yep.
Or if it's just the same Excel spreadsheet every day,
Yeah. No,
it gets real boring. So in your 40s, what kind of projects? Just bigger projects, or
yeah. So
what's some interesting projects that?
So now I work about just speaking generally, about half my time or half the projects I'll work on in a given year are commercials, sort of TV commercials of varying size and scope. And then
like car commercials, just pretty much anything.
Exactly. There's a fair amount of car commercials, a lot of stuff for Amazon or Microsoft or the other tech companies in town, but also just things like the Washington State Lottery does a whole series of sort of goofy commercials, for example, or a bank, or I worked for Bank of America on a big project last year. Just a variety of like products but when they're filming here in Washington State and want to be out on location. But then otherwise, movies and TV shows, which is what I want to be doing.
Because those are longer.
Yeah, and so it is. They are very different in terms of the nature of the work. So a typical TV commercial might film for 2 days, 3 days at most. That usually means I'm employed for that project for maybe 3 weeks. I might be brought on 2 or 3 weeks in advance to help them find things and prepare. But it's like that's the whole project.
What would you say? Maybe you don't know. Like, what's a budget for a commercial?
Really can run the gamut, but anything from $50,000 to $2 million, depending on the nature of the project. But the work itself is fairly condensed. It's in a short time period. If I'm on a movie, that instead of if a commercial's 3 weeks, a movie might be 3 or 4 months that I'm working on.
So then will you stay home, or will you have to go to the set and live there?
Well, it depends on where it is. So typically I'm brought on to projects that want to film here in Seattle or near Seattle.
Okay.
So like the whole point of hiring me versus some other version of me, is because I have working knowledge of how to get things done here.
So that's why, if it's a Hollywood thing, they don't want someone from California.
That's right. I mean,
because they don't have they may know the basic, but they don't have
that's right.
The core,
the local knowledge.
And so I don't know if I told you, I'm in property management.
Okay. Yeah, you mentioned.
And there's national based companies trying to get into the property management world, where it's like, okay, cool. They have way more funding, right? Of
course.
They're venture backed.
Yeah.
They got $50 million and then they can go spend all this money in advertising. But the one thing they can't buy is local expertise.
Yep.
Because I'll talk to potential owners or clients and be like, yeah, you can go work with that national based company, but their call centers in Texas, their property managers in Florida.
Yeah, that's right.
It's like, yes, the concept of property management should be the same in every city, but it comes down to local knowledge, right? I'm not going to go manage properties in Florida. Do I understand the basics of tenancy and landlord?
Yes,
sure.
Of course.
But I don't know the local area. I don't know the local laws. I don't know the local vendors.
Yeah. Yep.
So that's interesting. Because because I'm sure there's guys like you in California, but
Absolutely.
it's like
yeah, no,
they don't have the local knowledge.
that's right. And so typically when I'm brought on, it's for something that's happening here, at least in Washington State, not necessarily in Seattle. And so, and so that's becomes when like if I'm on a movie that is shooting up here.
What's a movie that we may know?
I worked on the most recent Borat movie, the Borat subsequent movie film.
So do you like watching movies in general? Do you enjoy movies?
Absolutely love watching movies. So, so that was a very interesting project. To sort of with
so that was based. That was in Seattle.
Well, part of it was not the whole movie.
But so you'll only deal with the part that's here, and then
right.
someone else will be in another city.
Exactly. When they go to Indiana or go somewhere else,
yeah, you're not going.
There's someone else that is handling it for them there. You know.
Yeah.
One of my favorite projects is a little bit lesser known movie, but one that's worth seeing. It was a movie called Captain Fantastic, which has this sort of goofy name, like sounds like a comic book movie, but is not that. It starred Viggo Mortensen, who was from Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
And
it's funny, he did that movie, which was huge, and then I feel like a lot of his projects after that were pretty minor.
Exactly. And this one, he actually received an Oscar nomination for Captain Fantastic, but it was sort of a lesser known movie. But it was about a family that is living off the grid here in the Northwest. So like living in the woods, punched out from society is the nature of the story. And so filming that was, we went out into the wild with the film crew. You know, the locations we were filming were Mount Rainier area, Mount Baker area.
So you would go out there.
And so a large part of what I was doing was finding those places that we needed that were sort of wilderness areas, and then managing the process of bringing the film crew to them in order to be able to film. And so,
are you like, would you be booking hotel, figuring out food, or is that someone else?
That it's someone else that does that. That's the sort of second wave of it. But part of what I would do, like when we're filming, there's a place outside North Bend that I filmed more than once. That's sort of a campground because it's this beautiful campground area. So, so part of what one of the reasons that I like it as a location is because you can step just off the road and it looks like you're 50 miles from civilization. But in reality, you're not.
There's a road right
there.
Yeah,
because I'm able to bring in all the people and equipment and everything that is required in order to do it. And so finding those sorts of places, in the case of a movie like that, you know, there was 30 locations in the movie. So for every one of those scenes in the movie, you know, where I was finding several options for the director. So like if it's a campground, I need to show the director more than.
So are they, again, for someone that knows nothing about this industry, I'm assuming they have an idea for all these different scenes and they're saying, go find it.
That's right.
Because I'm assuming with the movie, everything has to be pre-planned, at least thought through.
Yep.
Right?
There's
a script.
That's right. Yep.
There's an idea, but then they tell you ahead of time, here's all these, can you go find this? And
that's right. Like on a movie or show like that, basically I'm given the script early.
I'm assuming you're signing a bunch of NDAs and all that. Also, you can't talk about.
Yeah, that's right. So, in those, you know, in the time frame of the movie, where it's just a small group of people at the start that are given the script, I sort of break it down. I'll make a list out of that script. Say, it looks like you've got 30 different places, and then I'll talk with the director and the other filmmakers to get a sense of what they want. Like, what, you know, if there is in the script it says grandma's house or whatever it is, it's like, okay, director, what does that mean to you? What is
Have you worked with any directors I would know their name?
I mean, so
I ever know Steven Spielberg. Everyone knows
no one like that.
Michael Bay.
David Lynch is sort of who did Twin Peaks and has done a bunch of stuff. He's
okay.
the highest profile guy, I think. Richard Linklater is another film.
Are they usually pretty like easygoing guys to get along with? Are they pretty like?
It really depends. Yeah, I mean, a lot that I've worked with, and I've worked with my favorites are some local directors that are sort of based out of Seattle that are. But it really depends, you know.
Because I've heard, again, this is just like sometimes when you work with that people, I don't know if it's director, but actors can be very just put off, and it's like they live in such a different world or bubble that they don't even interact with the help.
I found that more than, I mean, I've met plenty of very nice actors also, but there's more actors that fit that description than directors in my personal experience.
Yeah, because as a director, you kind of have to get along with.
You're still engaged.
Like if you have a vision,
That's right.
If you want people to be part of your vision, you probably should learn some people skills.
Yep. So
That's interesting. A couple of recent projects maybe, I don't know if you're aware, there was there was a horror, I don't like watching horror movies, but there was one recently that I think was based out of Seattle where there was a doll that came to life. Megan or Meg or something.
I know of it. It wasn't shot here. It
Okay.
might have been set here. I mean,
Yeah.
and then that's sort of
Because that was the only reason I would have potentially watched it.
Yeah.
Because I don't like horror movies, but it was like it was a Pacific Northwest setting.
Yep. I know it didn't shoot here. That happens with a lot of projects. They'll going both ways, but they'll fake it. They'll shoot something in Pittsburgh but pretend it's Seattle, or shoot something in Vancouver, BC, and pretend it's Seattle. We'll also do the same thing. There'll be movies that film here that we're pretending to be somewhere else.
Interesting.
Based on the nature.
So there was that one, and then there was another. It was an Apple one. It wasn't They're doing so many remakes of Godzilla now.
Yeah. Right.
And so this was one that just came out on Apple, but is a TV show, Monsters, but there was a couple scenes that looked like they were in Seattle. That one looked like, because they were like, I was like, oh, that's literally Seattle.
It looks like it. Well, but it still wasn't. I'm almost positive. Yeah.
They got me, because I'm like,
tricky.
that's
tricky.
Yeah, that's gotta be Seattle.
Well,
because I was trying to figure out what building that was, or like, because they flew into Seattle, and I was just like, is that actually Seattle? Yeah.
Well, and a lot of time, I'll work on these sort of projects too, where you're able to now, maybe they send a small camera crew to capture those backgrounds.
Yeah.
But the actor that's standing in front of the building is never in front of the actual, or not never, but is often not in front of that building. They just are using the imagery and splicing it together.
Yeah. Well, what are your thoughts on? Have you heard of Sora? So, do you know who OpenAI is?
I do. I know OpenAI.
So they created. I use ChatGPT.
Yeah, sure.
So they then created a video, which is called Sora.
Okay.
And so now a lot of people are like, in that industry, are like, oh, you can now prompt it to just create that scene.
Absolutely. No.
So a lot of people are scared.
It's a big concern in our industry.
Yeah.
Yes, just generally that, like, where that's going. And
it hit the news. Like, Tyler Perry, I guess, was making a several $100 million studio. And then when he saw that, he said, this studio.
Do this instead. Yeah.
And he's like, why have I got to build this multi-$100 million studio when I literally, Sora's not out yet to do stuff like that. But
in a few more years or whatever. It will
for him, if I can spend $100 million to get Sora versus $800 million to build a studio that constantly, maintenance, update.
Yeah, sure. No.
I'm sure technology goes.
It's a concern for all of us in the industry that it's changing. All that sort of stuff is a factor.
Yeah. That's interesting to think through. I mean, all the writers were upset with ChatGPT because now it can write script.
Yep, absolutely. So,
but even now, when I post on YouTube, you have to tell YouTube, was this AI generated?
Got it.
You can use AI as a supplemental tool. They don't care.
Yeah.
But you have to tell YouTube if it was all AI generated, then they can have like a trigger warning.
Say that it is. I know the other thing I understand of it, at least currently, is it's much more difficult to copyright AI generated material. So that sort of helps us in the film industry.
Yeah.
When you want to own the imagery 100%, if it's AI generated, you can't. And so from that standpoint, it's helpful. And if you really want to make a movie and have it be your movie to make money off it as a movie studio.
Yeah. I think we're very far away from that whole industry collapsing.
Absolutely, yeah. But it's still out there.
It's like the music industry, right? When they used to sell, I still remember when I used tapes, right? Yeah. You remember times before tapes. My kids have no idea what a tape is. They don't know what CDs are.
Totally. No.
And so the industry just figures it out, right? Yep. Or now, I remember being one of the first guys at the gym who went from wired to wireless headphones, right? Everyone's you're trying to do your workout with your bench and then your thing falls off. And I saw this whole like wireless thing and I was like, I should try that. And now you look at the guy with the wire and you're like, you just look silly.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. Yeah, totally.
And it's usually, there is a guy though at the gym. I see he still has a cassette player. It's pretty funny.
Fascinating.
An older guy. But yeah, so it's like technology evolves, and then obviously people still make money from music, right? When things went digital with Napster and everything, oh, what's going to happen? And it's like Apple still makes a ton of money.
Yeah, no,
Spotify still makes a ton of money.
Yep.
It's funny because I don't own any music anymore.
Yeah, right.
I just pay Spotify
to stream it. Yeah,
to stream it.
Yep.
You know, so I'm sure they'll figure it out.
but it's constantly changing.
Yeah, they got some time, and I don't think anyone's too worried. If no one's too worried about multimillionaires losing their.
That's right. Yeah.
Like, oh, sorry, you lost your job.
Yeah.
Just keep making good movies.
Yep.
But so, 3 daughters. I have a daughter. So my daughter's 7. You have $2 that made it to college. What are some tips or tricks you can pass along to me to make sure I still have she loves me now, which is great. She still comes up to me. She still gives me hugs.
Yeah.
She still wants me to be a part of her life. And I'm hoping to continue that. But I know that she's going to get older. She's going to get hormones. She's going to get all that kind of... Like, I hear from some people like, hey, just expect there's a season of your life where they won't like you. I don't want that for me.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious what that was like raising your daughters.
I mean, boy, it's really hard to say. But yeah, it's... I mean, it's just a matter of, constantly, listening to what they need and being as responsive as possible. That's sort of, I mean, I try to encourage the independent thought, and let them do what they want to do.
How young is your youngest?
My youngest is 16.
16?
So 16, 18, and 20.
So did you ever have a boy talk with them where you're like, boys suck?
Sure. I mean, we certainly had those types of talks. And much credit to my wife. She does a lot of that also. Handles a lot of, not that we do them together, participate in those sort of things together.
Yeah.
But yeah, we've had. So
what do you like?
Conversations.
Because I think through this
problems and challenges with boyfriends.
I think through this myself, and it's like I don't want my daughter to think all men are terrible, but men do suck.
Sure.
So how do you instill in them like not to be afraid of men, but also you need men?
Well, I think.
Especially, I guess the age group matters as well. Like 18 to 22, they're just idiots.
But more so, I think. I mean, there's only so much you can control when it comes to that. And what I try to do more than anything is just continually demonstrate to them how a man should behave. So I hope that I do that in terms of just the kindness and compassion that I demonstrate towards them, and even perhaps more importantly, demonstrate towards their mother. And, sort of just to constantly provide them with an example of how a man should behave when it comes to all the time, but specifically in terms of my relationships with women. So easier said than done, you know what I'm saying? But that's sort of a concept is I really want to be able to demonstrate that always, and part of that too is, I'd sort of, I don't want to get too mushy about it, but like,
no, I want to. This is a selfish question.
Yeah. I mean, sort of being able to, the sort of compassion for their concerns, so from that, when they're worked up about whatever it is they're worked up about, to be able to really understand that those feelings.
That's a big problem in their life, even though, in the grand scheme of things.
For me, or that's what I'm trying to, is just or I may recognize that it is a passing thing, that they're going to get through it. Like, I know that as a grown up, you know what I'm saying? But trying to remember that when you're in that moment, that's much more difficult to see. And simply me saying, oh, don't worry about it, you're going to be fine, is not necessarily the best.
Yeah. I have the contrast of having boys and girls.
Yeah, sure.
And so with my boys, we just go do stuff together. We play basketball. So they feel loved because dad's playing basketball with me. Not every time do I want to play basketball with them because I have to do something, but it's like, no, I'm going to stop what I'm doing to go play. And I enjoy it 99% of the time. With my daughter, though, she doesn't always need me to do stuff with her. Yeah. She just wants me to be with her.
Yeah, that's
where it's like, let's just hang out. Let's just cuddle. I don't go cuddle with my boys.
Yeah, right.
We don't go cuddle. It's just with her, it's just more of, She just wants to know I'm there. And, but one thing it's different. So my boys, they think that, so I love all my kids equally, right? Should say that. I do believe that. The kids may say otherwise, but
Right.
but I tell because they look at the way I treat her and they're like, you treat her differently. And it's like, well, partly because she's a girl. Life's different for a girl than a boy.
Yeah.
Just like statistically speaking, a boy is less likely to have bad things happen to him
Yeah. Right.
than a girl is, right?
right. Yeah.
If you're out at 10 p.m. as a guy versus a girl, that's a real concern. Like, I would not want my wife. Well, I used to run marathons, and there was a time where I would go run at midnight.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Not smart,
Right. Right.
but I was like, I was working full time, going to school full time, and I was like, I got to put the miles in. And I remember running, I would go run 10 miles at midnight. Again, I don't recommend that now.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I was like, I would never want my wife to do that.
Right.
Ever.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right? Because this is like, that's just not safe. So,
Irresponsible. Yeah.
and so I'm hoping as my boys get older, they realize like, it's not that I love her more. It's just,
yeah. Just
life is
differently.
And even when I was listening to the Gautams talk about, so they're a married couple that study marriage. So they actually are married to each other.
Okay.
And because I've had this thought for a while and I heard him say the same thing. And he's just like, life's harder for a girl. Harder. I'm not saying it's easier or better for a guy. It's just different, right?
Oh, yeah.
As far as predatory or whatever. And so I want my daughter to know that she is loved and taken care of. Or with my boys, if I felt like if I coddled them the same way I did with her, life's going to just beat them up. Because no one, like if you're a guy and you're out there and you're easily triggered or you're easily offended and you're easily like, who's going to go cuddle with you? It's like, you're going to be ill prepared for the real world.
Sure.
Because life does not care, right? You're going to turn 18. You're going to leave my house. You're going to go out there and be like, I'm not prepared. So that's like again, this is the other thing I think about. Wanting her to be independent, but not so independent as she doesn't think she needs a man in her life.
Sure. Yep.
Because that's a thing that culture's saying is be girl boss. You don't need a man. But it's like, I think we love extremes.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, sure.
All men suck. I don't really think all men suck. Just immaturity is a man mentally doesn't become mature till he's 25.
That's right. Yes.
Where a girl usually can hit maturity like much sooner than that. And so, those are things I think through with my kids. And you've made
tricky.
You got two girls get to college. We don't have to get too much more into that because it's personal as far as relationship with them. But just, I'm assuming they still like you.
Yeah. We have great relationships.
Yeah.
I mean, I knock on wood as I say that all the time. But yeah, I mean, I think that's just because that it's the little things and continuing to listen to them and support them and try to encourage them to step outside their boundaries. One of my kids is suffers from an eating disorder that she had earlier and still has sort of ongoing issues.
Do you think we don't have to get too much into her?
That, was a big part of it.
Yeah, we don't have to get too much into her story, but just like, do you think she got that from social media?
Not quite.
Because for me, that's never been a struggle. So and I know it's a struggle for so many girls.
In her case, I don't think so. It was a very different sort of development. The timing it had to do with the pandemic and other things that were going.
That was a rough time.
It was rough for all my kids. That they had this chunk of their life that was removed because of the pandemic, and so. But in any case, just in terms of how it relates to raising them, a lot of that has taught me to sort of understand that there are problems that I cannot fully relate to. I don't have that problem, so I can't. But that doesn't change how I need to react to it and listen and help problem solve through those sort of things. That applies to all three of my daughters, not in terms of how I go about it and the issues they're confronting and just being as supportive as possible. And like I said, trying to demonstrate how a man should behave as much as possible to help them for, what I hope that eventually leads to is when they are choosing mates, when they get to those key decisions in their lives, it's affecting that choice in a positive way because they're able to recognize things that they value when it comes to the men in their life, and have those be the right things that they're valuing.
Yeah, because they look at a lot of these girls that come from troubled past or maybe do questionable things as a young adult. They always go back to, did you have a father in the home?
Yeah, sure.
And they find a lot of these girls either had no father or had a poor relationship with their father.
Yeah.
And so then you're like, and that's why they're making the life choices they are today.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You know, there's certain content that's made today, and they're like, they can go back to most of these girls and be like, either extremely religious or just I did not have a good relationship with dad, or I just had no dad.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, and then we kind of talked about college, but I guess as you thought through sending your kids to college, what set you over the edge to be like, yeah, college is a good thing?
Yeah. No, I mean, that's a tough question. Or obviously, as we sort of talked about earlier, it's much tougher now than it was.
Yeah, because I think about that with my kids.
I really lean so into. I think everyone should get as much education as possible, like just as a holistic statement.
Yes,
right?
I believe in education.
And so, from that standpoint, like there's this division in our country between the educated and the uneducated, and like gain as much knowledge, get as much exposure to the world and understanding of how the world functions as is possible. If that is college, fantastic. You know what I'm saying? And for like my kids, it
Do they know what they want to study?
Yeah. And they're a little, they're more motivated than I was, at least the first two so far, you know, in terms of knowing kind of the directions that they want to head.
What degrees are they going?
So my
please don't say gender studies.
Not gender studies. My oldest is psychology. She wants to be a therapist, in part because she learned a lot from the process she went through with her own struggles, and is now looking to sort of pay it forward, the help that she received, and that's sort of defining her trajectory. And my middle child, the second one, is environmental science and wants to go into, you know, sustainable forestry and oceanography and things like that I was interested in as a child too. So.
Well, for the one that wants to psychology, you can send her, not to promote my channel, but the gal, I'm releasing her video next week. Literally, her favorite course was psychology.
That's great. Yeah.
And then she is a licensed independent clinical social worker.
That's the sort of,
and so that's the point of this video, is for someone like your daughter.
Yeah, to be able to
go listen to a 33-year-old, right, talk about what it was like in her 20s. She got her master's at 21, and
great. Yeah.
And so that's literally the point. So you know, your daughter may never meet this lady, but she can hear her story and be like, okay, these were some of the, cause she talks about the struggles of like the stress, or like she had to learn to, when you're dealing with people with high stress, right? Suicide or whatever, how do you not take that home with you?
Yeah. Yeah.
Cause she said, the turnover was like 89%.
Wow.
Within the first year. So that tells you like the work's so hard that you have to find a way to relieve stress, because you're literally taking on other people's stress.
Yeah.
And so she would go home and think about, what about Bill today, or what about Sally today, or whatever. So I think that'd be a powerful podcast for her.
That's great. Yeah.
To listen to. Again, not to promote my channel, but
that's great.
That's why I do this. So it's like I get to now meet all these people and share their story. And that's why I'm meeting younger and younger people. You're still young. Because what I found was sometimes it's hard for a 20-year-old, because I still want to talk to 70 and 80-year-olds because I enjoy it. And I know other people will, but sometimes for a 20-year-old, it sounds hard for them to relate to a lady in her 70s who maybe did the same thing, because they're like, man, that's so far away. Or they forget some of those details. Like if you talk to someone, like, because we kind of passed over your 20s. We talked about it a little bit, but when I talk to someone in their 33, 20s is still very fresh.
That's right. Yeah.
Right. And so, I would love for your daughter to listen, and then I'm curious what her feedback is.
Yeah. Sounds good.
After listening to it. So I'm going to release that next week.
Cool.
But yeah, so I think that's great. Like, I'm not anti-college. It's just go to college for a purpose and a reason.
Yep.
And, you know, I went to college. I got a bachelor's. I have 2 masters. And I've learned more outside of college because I've deliberately taken the time to go learn. And now I go learn from, I think why podcast did so well, or is doing so well, is now you're having people who I'm stealing from someone else's 30,000 hours, right? Like the Gotams.
Yeah.
Right? They literally studied marriage for 30 years. They put in 100,000 hours, right? So why do I go listen to them? Because they have put in the hours and they're like, statistically, this is how things work out. If you do, so the book is literally called The Seven Principles of a Healthy Marriage, right? It's different talking to someone who's been married for a year, right? Versus someone who's been married for 30 years and researched it for 30 years.
Right. Right.
So that's where it's like, I remember sitting in college one time and the guy, decent guy, I think he was in the Air Force. So I had no qualms with the guy himself. But I remember him teaching me about, it was a course on sales. And I raised my hand and I was, not to be like mean, but like, this is how you sell. And I asked him, have you ever sold anything in your life? He said, no.
Yeah.
And I'm like, then what are we doing right now?
Right.
Right. And like, that's kind of where I see the disconnect with college today is some people have only ever been in the academia world, right? They went to college.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then they went and got their master's and then they became working on their PhD. And then they're just always in academia. So in theory, it's all theory. It's all theory. And then it's like, now they're teaching the next kids. And it's not based on their reality.
Yeah, right.
Or it's not based on any reality. It's just like, this is what we think how life should be. And it's like, dude, that's not real life.
Yep. No, I understand that.
And so that's kind of one of my things with college is I'm all about learning, right? I've learned way more now than I did in college. Ask me any of the courses I took. It's funny when you mentioned oceanography. You took that course and loved it. I took that course and I hated it.
Gotcha. Yeah.
The same thing it was super funny when she told me she took psychology. I was like, dude, I took that in my senior year of high school and I hated it.
Right.
And she loved it, which is great. But yeah, thinking of college today and hopefully they figure out the product that it is today, it's different than the product it was before.
Absolutely.
And the cost
It's
today
nuts.
is outrageous
Cost is
versus the
crazy.
cost for you.
That's
so
right.
it's like,
That's right. Well, a cool philosophy about that. I'm stealing it from a friend of mine who gave me the same advice about what, but that is what he has told his kids when it comes to college and sort of decision making and sort of what his goals for his children as they're at college age has said. But by the time you're 25, what I hope for you is that you have gone to college or more generally gone to school, understood what it's like to go to school as an adult, to study full time, that you have experienced that you have also worked full time, that you've worked a job that's more than just flipping burgers, but so you understand what it is to work and that you've traveled, that you've experienced other parts of the world, other parts of the country enough to inform your own personal worldview. But by the time you're 25, I hope that you've experienced all three of those things, not necessarily even in equal amounts, but that you've done all three because it's the combination of those things that are going to help you decide what you want to do and where you best fit. And so I like that. I like the idea of it. It sort of feeds into that. It's not for everyone to go to college, and there's a lot of reasons not to these days. But in the right circumstance, it is great, and for the right person in the right circumstance, it is great. But it needs to be balanced against other ways that you're learning and educating yourself. So,
yeah, I like that. So another one of my favorite questions is, now that in your current age, I don't ask people if they have regrets because I think that's a silly question. But what are things that you've learned and picked up among the years that now that you're like, man, that would have been helpful to know that when I was younger, that now you know it, but like you didn't know that earlier. And you're like, man, that would have helped in this situation. Or if you want an example, I can give you one. Okay. But so for me, it was, I was into fitness. I've always been into fitness, but in my 20s, I didn't understand I didn't really understand macros as well. I didn't understand the importance of protein. I didn't understand the science behind a lot of it. Where now in my 30s, I do. So now I understand now I understand why I gained weight. And now I understand how to lose weight. So just that was knowledge that would have been extremely helpful to have understood. Like if I would have understood how my body actually works in my 20s, then I would have probably just been able to balance
something different.
So again, it's not a regret. It's just like, that makes sense to, like, for me, with my kids, I kind of want them, at least my boys, if my daughter wants to get into it, to do some form of bodybuilding, not even for the show itself, but just going through the steps of like really understanding how food impacts your body, right? Because when you bodybuild, that's literally, you're seeing the direct influence of like, if I intake this, this is the result.
Yeah, right.
Which is, most people don't understand that. And then they wonder why they're extremely overweight, or they wonder why.
Whatever it is.
So that's why it's like, if you understand the calories and you understand the proteins and you understand that stuff, that will greatly impact like, oh, now I understand. So now I'm a lot, I don't stress about it, but now I'm a lot more conscientious of like, I know why I gained that extra pound. Now I know how to lose it. Just the concept of bulking, cutting, muscle building. To me, I think that's a valuable thing to know, whether or not you're into fitness, because you know, over 70% of Americans are overweight. So that's one thing.
Yeah.
That's a personal example. I didn't understand that in my 20s. I understand that much more now. So I was just curious if there's things that you now that, because how old are you now?
53.
53. So like 20 years ago, you're almost my age. What are things you know now that you didn't know back then that were like,
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I'm sure there are many things. It's sort of hard to come up with one. Or
yeah, I've had time to think about mine.
Yeah, but I mean, I would say, I mean, in general, like to go back to my big career change, these big moments in my life, that being one of them, that was a very obviously pivotal moment where my whole path changed as a result of those decisions, and I'm happy with those changes. Each of those times that I've had these big moments of moving to Seattle to go to school, quitting my job, you know, the big things that have happened. I'm happy they did, but also I would do them differently. You know what I'm saying? So, that I do regret components of them. You know, and so from that standpoint, it's even hard to articulate the specifics of that. But if I were to do it again, I would do a similar thing, but not exactly the same. You know, and so and it's fine, and it's sort of what are those, what pieces of that are different, you know. I mean, I talk about going to school, and when I struggled in school and college, and you know, and made this career change, made this major change,
Right.
that then ultimately led to my career change, right?
Yeah.
So, but man, you know, I should have studied more.
Yeah.
You know, it's just that's like, I mean, I also wonder what my life would be like if I had not sort of been flaked for that period in my life and had applied myself like I was capable of. What would be different now? Of course, my entire life would be different.
Yeah.
But it's like
that ripple effect.
But it's sort of, I think it's possible to kind of regret that, and at the same time, be happy with it because I am happy with where it led me. You know, but those two things aren't exclusive. You know, it's recognized.
Yeah.
So.
I had this thought the other day. You get out of life what you put in, which sounds pretty vague and broad, but it's like, if you don't like your output, change the input.
Yeah, sure.
Right? So it's like, if I'm currently looking at my life, whatever age you are, for me, my mindset is, it's easier for me to help younger people because I'm older than versus older people, because I'm like, I don't know. I haven't been that age, right? I'm learning the principles of life, but I'm not 50, so I don't know what that's like. And so with young people, it's like, okay, if you're unhappy, you are not satisfied, if you're looking at your life and all the outputs that you're getting aren't great, then simply adjust the inputs.
Right.
It's that simple, right? And so looking back at your college, right, your inputs was not studying, probably drinking more than you should have, you know, poor time management, just
all the things.
You look at all the input, and then no wonder you had that output.
Exactly.
And that's what people don't get. It's like, it's all these little input things, right? What are my inputs in my life? It's like, okay, I feel pretty satisfied with life right now, right? And it's like, you know, I love my wife, love my kids. For me, it's like my main priorities are, you know, faith, family, fitness, right? They're my 3 F's, and then career. And then there's other things that I do, but it's like, I make sure my input's good. And so for anyone whose therapy is great, right? That's another tool, but it's like, if you're looking at your life right now and you're not liking the result, what is the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing and expecting something different.
Yep.
And so if you're listening to this and you're sitting here and you're like, man, my life sucks. And it's like, well, change the input, right? Go do something crazy. Go do a gap year. Go do something out of the norm that causes you to change where you're currently at.
Yep.
Right.
No,
So in college for you, your input was certain habits that got an output. Thankfully, you were able to adjust and you still made it. So your mistakes don't have to crush you in life. But like you said, it's like things that you didn't do optimally can affect your life.
That's right.
Right.
Yep. Absolutely. So.
But well, thanks for having this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure.
Yeah, it was nice. It's so funny. Like, again, we didn't know each other, but just how many common things that we have. That's great. You literally go up to strangers and talk to them. And so me talking to you wasn't that crazy because you literally do it. But I actually did want to, I had a question. It's like, I plan on doing this for a while. What are some tips and tricks that you've picked up along the way as you randomly encounter strangers? Because it's a lost art today. For people to talk to strangers.
Yes.
I know how to talk to strangers when it comes to selling. Because I have a sales background. But what I do and what you do, it's like you're selling them in something totally different, which is themselves or their time.
Yeah, that's right. No, it's like whenever I'm in that circumstance, I've learned I need to get to the connection point quick.
Yes.
Like whatever it is, whether I'm selling something, because I'm kind of selling is part of what I'm doing, but it's like I got to get to the interesting thing fast, and so if I don't, it's over. Or then that's when people will close the door or hang up the phone or just obviously not engage with what I'm trying to connect on. And so sort of learning that is the trick, but and also being willing to accept failure, as you mentioned too. You get I get rejected more than I get accepted when it comes to those sort of things by a wide margin. So from that standpoint, it's just keep doing it. I keep doing. What
was and I think having talked to you for a while, I think you're comfortable answering this, but just for the listener, because I may, how people start like TikTok challenges. My challenge to people is talk to strangers, make that like a thing rather than going and punching them in the face. Why do you have a conversation?
Yeah.
So let's go back and rehash our initial interaction, what that was like for you. Because it sounds like you already were comfortable with that. So it just happened to be but I think you can now look back on it and be like, what was my demeanor to you? Or what vibe did you get from me? Who was this random guy trying to talk to
me? It was very open and honest. With the sauna where the fellas all hang out and shoot the breeze is a good, I enjoy that process anyway, of like just whatever it's like talking about last night's game or whatever it is that comes up in sort of the conversation among random old dudes.
Yeah.
So from that standpoint, I enjoy that level of interaction typically, And so you did a great job. You were just it was just that. It was like, I forget exactly. But it was like, what's going on? But for a living, and let's start a conversation up. I'm happy to have that with anyone who.
And that's what I try to encourage people to do. It's like, it's not as scary as you think it is. Like, there's certain settings that could be scarier, but like generally, if someone's going to the gym, that means they're trying to do something better for themselves.
Yeah, sure.
They're hanging out in the sauna. So you can do things like if you just go up to some stranger in the supermarket and try to have a conversation. Setting matters.
Sitting around by nature is like
So another guest I had a podcast with is Nancy, and I was telling her how much I love the sauna. And she's never done the sauna. So I saw her the other day, and she's like, I went to the sauna. And no one wanted to talk. I was just like, I'm sorry, I've never been to a girl's sauna. So I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know what that's like, but I just know for guys, it's
just need a bunch of middle-aged dudes to hang out. Then
and that's literally where this idea of the podcast came from. Was I was having interesting conversations with men in the sauna.
That's hilarious, but that's great.
And I was like,
I believe it. Yeah.
Let me take this outside. But again, I highly recommend people go talk to people.
Absolutely.
Because you'll be surprised, right?
That's right.
How much in common you have.
Yep.
And then I've already learned some stuff from you. And
great.
I go back and I will re-listen to this conversation and make little shorts, and that will just re-emphasize like little tips. Because here's what's the funny thing. If I would have just gone up to you, because I'm going to make at least 10 clips from our conversation. if I went up to you and said, tell me 10 different things about your life, it'd be hard.
It'd be hard to do it.
Because you'd be like, it'd be hard. But we had a long conversation where now I'll go back and be able to highlight those 10 different things.
Yeah, absolutely.
And by having a conversation. So
cool. Oh, well, happy to do it.
Well, it was nice meeting you.